Okay, so we're going to talk about margin of error real quick and show you some examples. Now, with the this being an election year, 2020, you hopefully would have seen a poll or two out there in the world, and so there's just a lot of polling, a lot of data that is done, and you're going to see margin of error, or you should see margin of error with that type of information. So um, just some things I Googled on the internet. Go through this real quick. So this was a poll that was done. We don't know exactly who did it. It doesn't say, but the question is, should the U.S. government stop help funding the National Public Radio, NPR? You see that the breakdown of yes, they should stop, no, they shouldn't, total, and then they do it by political affiliation, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. So, but the interesting part of the data, maybe not interesting but important, is what they don't say. So anytime you're listening to the news or you're reading an article and they have some sort of poll like this and data, they talk about the numbers here, right? That looks like majority of people altogether would not support stopping funding NPR. They would rather it continue. But down here, this is where we get this information that tells us how good of a poll something is. So it tells us the date, which that's my brother's birthday. And it tells us how many people were in this survey. So it tells us that 1,074 registered voters nationwide. So it doesn't say how they got this information. It doesn't say if they did it by mail, by online polling. It doesn't say if it was a phone call. So that would also determine what kinds of people they contacted. And then they give us a margin of error, and it says plus or minus 3%. So this is a value that we find. And what that tells us is that how reliable is this poll? Usually you're going to have a margin of error. If you have plus or minus 3, that's not too bad. And the larger your sample size is, the better your data. So at just over 1,000 people, it's not a huge sample, but in the areas of polling, it's not too bad. So what does this plus or minus 3% mean? Well, that means that these numbers are off plus or minus 3, meaning that here it says that 25% of Democrats support the ending of funding National Public Radio, but we have to take in consideration this plus or minus 3%. So it's not an exact science. This is where stats and definitely polling data gets that gray area. This is why people were surprised when polls are wrong. It's not an exact number. 25% is what they say, but it has a range, and that range means that we're going to add 3% to it and subtract 3% from it in order to get the actual range of the Democrats in this category. So here, this is telling us that with this margin of error, the Democrats would actually be, 22 to 28%. So it's just a range. So 22 to 28% of Democrats would support ending NPR funding. Same thing with this 58%. We would have to add 3 and subtract 3. So it's not a true 58% say no. They say if we take away 3, that's 55 to 61. So it gives us that range. What it gives us is our interval. and then we're going to talk about confidence interval too. Okay. Another thing we can look at, this one. Okay. So again, something I stole off the internet. And I stole it because it does give us this bottom information. So if you see polls that they don't tell you how many people are in the survey, you know, kind of watch out for that. And usually they will tell you a date, and then they should give you that margin of error, that plus or minus number. So here they tell us that who conducted this survey. This is Monmouth University, and that's a pretty established polling place. And they got this data between March 2nd and 5th. Doesn't say what year, but they only surveyed 803 adults. Now it doesn't say, are they registered voters? Are they all in one state? Are they over the age of, you know, whatever, or between the ages of something? They just say they're 803 adults. So good information, but definitely not all the information. But again, we can see that in this type of survey, who do you trust more? And they have CNN as 48%, and then they have plus or minus 3%. So again, it's not a true 48%. We're gonna have to take 3.5% off and add 3.5% on to get the range of people who actually did say they trust CNN as a network. And so it'd be what? Top would be 51.5 and 44.5, so about 44.5% to 51.5%. So it's that range. If you see this margin of error really considerably high, anything creeping up to that 5 plus or minus 5%, that's not great. So, you know, people do polling all the time, or places do polling, and the higher your margin of error, higher your, you know, situation for error will be. So the more people in your survey, the better. The lower your margin of error is, the better. So usually the more people you have, the lower your margin of error would be. And then, so this is kind of how we use it in everyday life. And then we're gonna see in the next video how to actually get it and do math with our new table. So I will see you, or you will actually see me in the next video.